I don't know if, how much you know about the history of St. Paul, which you're from a town just north of there.
Yes.
So basically, St. Paul, the early 1900s, was fucking insane. So I took a lot of this from Matt Reicher writing for the Minnesota Post and a Medium article by Michael Cooper. And we're going to talk a little bit about a guy named John J. O'Connor.
Right.
So John J. O'Connor was born in Louisville, Kentucky to Irish parents on October 29th, 1855, but moved with his parents to St. Paul the following year, where they became prosperous and prominent citizens. After he was finished with school, John worked as an accountant for 10 years. He hated the job and instead became interested in detective work.
What?
And he eventually received an offer for a job as a police detective in 1881, and he took it. Because in those days, you could just be an accountant for 10 years and be like, this sucks, actually. Can I be a cop? And they're like, sure. Would you like a high position? Yes. That's all it took.
Sure you don't want to be a fireman?
Right. It's literally, you're just, your
How
last...
about a grocer?
Yeah. They're like,
There's like 15 people in the entire town.
Right. But he's the one Irish guy. So they're like, you're a cop now. Because that's what they did back then. So John eventually worked his way up to the chief of detectives. So he was the head of the entire department of the detectives, anyway, of the police force in St. Paul. And during his time in this role, he came up with a system to battle organized crime with organized intelligence.
Ooh.
He's a thinking man.
Buzzword.
Yeah. So O'Connor kept a photo gallery at the train station, and if any criminals were identified, they'd be registered, photographed, put back on the train, and deported from St. Paul. So he was one of the first guys that was like, hey, we should take pictures of all the people we arrest so we know who they are.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
no one had, this had not crossed anyone's fucking mind until the 1880s. And he hung them all up on the wall at the train station. So the train station in St. Paul had like a rogues gallery. And so all the cops had to do was just look at the wall and be like, that guy, get him out of here. Which is, it's like, I love when you reach it about the 19th century specifically, because you're like, so much of this I can't believe isn't just common sense. Like the second the camera's invented.
Yes.
But
are the pictures still like them in front of a farmhouse holding like the
yeah, it's the American Gothic. Yeah. They all have to pose with a plain looking woman and a pitchfork. Yeah, so anyway, he spent the next 4
Wait, let's go back to how is that not the first thing when they invented the camera?
Yeah.
How is it not how didn't we didn't use it to punish criminals right away? What the fuck were they thinking? You want to take a picture of your wife? Shut up. Shut up.
Look, what is there to take pictures of? Things that can't move. So who are the humans that can't move? Dead or in jail.
I mean, we all know it was for dick pics.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. They always say,
Dick's frowning too.
American Gothic. Yeah.
They show that old like daguerreotype of, I think it's ships in a harbor is the first picture ever taken, but I'm always like, that's the second. That's the second picture ever taken.
I just like how they didn't waste time with smiling back then.
Yes.
Well, they couldn't.
It was hard to hold.
Yeah, you had to be able to hold yourself still for like 10 to 15 seconds sometimes with like daguerreotypes or 10 types. So that's,
You can't smile for 15 seconds?
I mean,
I plaster one on every time I'm around
I
someone
don't
who's
think
30
you're
years older than
supposed
me.
to move at all.
Right.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, that's right.
I saw a little show about a guy who makes those makes modern versions of them.
Yeah, I had there were some people at the Boogie out in Waverly a few years ago that were doing 10 types. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna get one, and then they were pretty expensive. So I was like,
dude.
actually,
After seeing the process of how they make them, I could see them being very fucking expensive.
yeah.
But you get a picture that looks like a picture from the 1800s.
Right.
Legitimately, it is cool.
Yeah.
You see like every pockmark and every bead of sweat.
You'd see how distinguished Rivers looks, basically.
Oh yeah. Oh, I got somebody who actually has like incredibly badass lenses to do headshots, and I was like, can we use a worse lens? Actually, I don't
want to see my brain.
Right. My face looks like the surface of the moon. So John worked his way up to the chief of detectives in 1894, and in 1900, a new administration came to power. They fired the entire police force, and John O'Connor was named the chief of police. Almost immediately, he gave himself nearly absolute power, and he also decided to make a slight tweak to the system of registering and deporting criminals at the train station. In an era wrought with illicit activities and smuggling, gambling, racketeering, O'Connor devised a plan to keep crime out of St. Paul by harboring criminals within it.
Oh my gosh.
Interesting theory.
It's hard.
Paul Maccabee, author of John Dillinger Slept Here, A Crook's Tour of Crime and Corruption in St. Paul, Minnesota, says, quote, Any gangster could come into St. Paul as long as they were on good behavior.
Oh my gosh.
For instance, they could go to Iowa, rob a bank, and then go to Minneapolis and kill whoever they wanted to. But when they came into St. Paul, they could just had to be on their best behavior.
This guy was just a corrupt cop.
It's like the
So he was just a guy that if they paid him off, they could do whatever they wanted, as long as they chilled in city limits.
Right.
But St. Paul was like the John Wick Hotel.
Straight up.
Yes.
100%.
Wow.
It's exactly
You
what it
go in
was.
and they're like, we have rules here.
It's you literally go to St. Paul, touch base, and call Butterfingers, and you're fine.
Yes.
Everyone hangs their gun up at the door so they can all have a drink.
100%. That's exactly
Oh my
what this was.
gosh.
So Chief O'Connor reached out to criminals throughout the Midwest, letting them know that St. Paul was a safe place for them. He promised that the police would disregard offenders who performed their deeds beyond the city limits of St. Paul, and they would also
The
be
Kansas City diddler can go there and just have a drink.
and they would be
Horrible.
and they would be protected from extradition as well. So like not only are they cool there, other cops are just not allowed in St. Paul to bust these people.
AKA
Oh my
buzzkill
gosh.
officials.
Yeah. So to accomplish his plan, O'Connor requested a liaison from within the criminal ranks to keep an eye on his peers. William Reddy Griffin was a gangster from New York and the first keeper of what became known as the O'Connor Layover System Agreement. So among his many duties, Griffin collected bribes and brought money to O'Connor. When Griffin died of apoplexy in 1913 at the age of 65, Dapper Dan Hogan took over his role until he got car bombed to death in 1928.
That, to death makes it sound like that happened many times.
I just didn't want you to think it's a De Niro in Casino situation. Like he died. He died. When he got car
He didn't
bombed.
crawl out of one into another car that exploded.
He didn't briefly become a very obvious dummy before returning to the form of Robert De Niro. So these were the rules of the agreement. Number 1, criminals must register or check in with a police liaison at downtown's Hotel Savoy. So there literally was a John Wick hotel.
wow.
I don't know if that one's still there. Are you familiar with the Hotel Savoy?
Now there's like a Savoy pizza place.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Maybe that was
Criminals
where it
eat
used to be.
free.
Rule number 2, criminals must agree to pay cash bribes to the police and city officials.
Okay.
And number 3, they must commit no major crimes while within the city limits. I'll rob a purse here and there.
Yeah, but
yes.
you can litter.
Jaywalk.
Yeah, you can jaywalk.
Yeah, I pissed on the Hubert Humphrey statue. Who cares?
Yeah, see?
Yeah.
When every criminal talked like that.
So, while incredibly corrupt, the agreement was largely successful in preventing crime in St. Paul. For the entirety of O'Connor's tenure as chief of police, St. Paul was a paradise. Meanwhile, the rest of Minnesota became an epicenter of illegal activity, with major crimes committed across the state almost weekly. Many newspaper crime stories ended with the all too familiar sentence, quote, "The suspects were last seen fleeing towards St. Paul."
Oh my god.
It's literally touching base. It is literally
crazy.
do whatever crazy shit you want to do, but if you make it back to St. Paul, which I should add is the capital of the state,
Yes.
as long as you touch base with the police chief, you're good.
And that's now St. Paul's like the most boring city. It shuts down at like 6. It's just
That's what I was going to ask.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
I've been there once, but I was there
It's chill.
during the day, and it was pretty chill.
It's just a cute little uptown type city, and nothing really happens there. You go-
Right.
you go-
And they're not Minneapolis, and they have a
Yeah.
bit of an axe to grind about that, but,
yeah.
seemed fine.
And what's funny too is you said like everywhere else there's crime, because Minneapolis became like a hub for corporations.
Yeah, yes. Yeah.
We have Target there, and like General Mills based
Yeah,
there,
yeah.
and like Honeywell. So the crimes are like, let's start a business.
So the layover agreement was so lucrative for both sides that criminals policed their own colleagues to ensure no one ruined a good thing. If anyone broke O'Connor's rules, the police rarely had to get involved because those things had a way of working themselves out.
So you'd have the other mobsters deal with
Right.
it.
Yeah. People are just like, this is awesome. You are fucking this up for all of us. I'll kill you. I'll put a fucking screwdriver in the back of your head. This shit rules. Don't
Yeah.
mess around in St. Paul.
Okay, we need to write this movie, by the way.
I love it. I love this.
It's called Don't Mess Around in St. Paul.
We'll have the Hold Steady do the soundtrack, you know?
Oh, yeah, there you go.
They were last seen headed for St. Paul. The 18th Amendment went into effect January 16th, 1920, and John O'Connor retired from the police force in December of that year. So that's Prohibition kicks in 1920. By the time he retired, O'Connor was the highest paid city official, but he still was only making $62,000 a year in today's money. So
my gosh.
It's the weirdest thing. And it's also what's like weird about, like, it kind of reminds me of Biden a little bit. It's like you shepherded so many corporations into just thieving in Delaware your entire career, and you're not rich, but you fucking loser.
But that's the thing is, you're not accounting for the bribes he's getting.
Right. He's not declaring all that.
He's probably making twice as much, if not more, from bribes.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But yeah, so O'Connor was able to live lavishly and spent over $1 million in his lifetime just in horse racing. So you're right. Yeah, there was that was the official amount coming in, but there was a lot of cash going in and out of this guy's pocket.
Man, gambling's so cool. When you hear stories like that, lost $1 million watching horses run.
You got to spend money to make money, man.
That's true.
That's why I'm terrified to gamble.
Because you might make too much money.
Yeah, I might become too successful at it.
So he retired, but the O'Connor layover system persisted. But with crime ramping up in response to Prohibition, and without O'Connor's heavy hand to police it, things began to change. St. Paul's crime rate eventually surged. The city that he enjoyed a reputation for safety in the previous decade became Mos Eisley Cantina from Star Wars.
Right.
So pretty much all of the
Greedo
famous...
shooting first all over the fucking place.
Listen to this list. These are people who lived in St. Paul at one point. Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, the Ma Barker Gang, Machine Gun Kelly, Pretty Boy Floyd, Babyface Nelson, and of course, Alvin Creepy Carpus. They were all there.
Satan.
Yeah,
The Grinch.
It is literally just solo. Like it's just all
Jabba the Hutt.
yeah, pretty much. Alvin Creepy Carpus, by the way, was the only person in the Ma Barker Gang that didn't get gunned down and ended up in jail in California, where he taught a young Charles Manson to play guitar.
Can you bring up a
Oh,
picture of
wow.
him? I want to see how creepy he looks.
Oh yeah,
Creepy
He's got
carpets.
the name Creepy.
Yeah.
I hope he looks fucking creepy.
it's
It's not
he's-
like one of those.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah, he's pretty.
It's not ironic.
Yeah, no, he's pretty damn creepy looking. We're not gonna lie.
It's not even his face; it's his
It's
eyes.
the eyes. Yeah,
It's too much eyes.
yeah. Manson learned everything he knew from that guy, though.
Wow.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. In June of 1930, St. Paul got a new police chief, Thomas Big Tom Archibald.
Oh.
So,
Oh boy.
his appointment to the job had been engineered by Leon Gleckman, who was known as the Al Capone of St. Paul. Chief Brown refused to obey or enforce the traditional ban on unnecessary violence laid out by the O'Connor plan, and immediately allied himself with John Dillinger and the Barker Carpus gangs.
My
This is
God.
the chief of police. So the thing that was keeping the thing in place was like, hey, you can live here, but just don't cause any shit. He was like, actually, screw that. I'm with these real famous gangs now. So this guy's awesome.
Have fun.
By the time Prohibition ended in 1933, the city's criminals had completely taken over St. Paul. No longer able to make money selling illegal liquor, many turned to ransom. In June, the city was shocked to learn of the kidnapping of the Ham Brewing Company president, William Ham Jr., by the Barker Carpus gang. So
That's a beloved beer.
I was going to say Ham's beer. I've had
That
Ham's
guy?
beer. So they're just like, they just kidnapped him off the street too. They're like, get him. And then they did. And they got a bunch of money for it.
Nice.
They,
Used to be a respectable community of criminals.
in January of 1934, the gang struck again, this time carrying off the mobbed up banker and Schmidt Brewing Company heir, Edward Brimmer. So if you know Schmidt beer, which is, they were just like all the
Don't
most,
brew beer in St. Paul.
it's so funny how it's just like the most obvious people. They're like, what do we see around us that we could kidnap? Beer? Yeah. And that's as far as they thought it out.
Wow.
Even Leon Gleckman, the Al Capone of St. Paul, himself got kidnapped at one point. The ransom was paid.
Kind of a rite of passage at a certain point.
The ransom was paid. The kidnappers were found murdered, and the chief, Tom Brown, confiscated the ransom money. He said he took it to police headquarters, but the money was never seen again.
Wow.
So yeah, we've gone from like a guy with, kind of like a funny but admittedly kind of smart idea to keep crime down in one specific region, and then he just gets taken over by like, oh no, let's just have an actual gangster be the police chief.
Well, the thing is, the first guy was the actual gangster. He was just actually in charge.
Right.
New
Yeah,
chief came in like
That's
a punk.
true.
that's true.
Got fucking probably extorted.
So the kidnapping of such public figures alerted the nation and forced the federal government to intervene. And this is kind of the birth of the FBI in a real way. Was
Wow.
basically they were having to be brought into St. Paul because it was like, I don't know, the police chief isn't doing anything about this. Like somebody has to fucking do something.
What's funny to me too is like a lot of people, they get to Minnesota and like in the fall or summer and they don't realize that our winters are just horribly cold. So I like the idea of these criminals coming in and then just like, oh God, what are we doing here? In St. Paul. Just like,
This is supposed to be a paradise, boss.
Yeah.
What are we doing here?
yeah.
So the arrival of federal agents in St. Paul spelled the beginning of the end for the Layover Agreement. Under surveillance by a higher authority, local officials could no longer ignore crime and accept bribes with impunity. In 1934, the federal government passed a series of crime laws that increased the FBI's jurisdiction. This allowed the Bureau to attack the gangster menace throughout the country. That same year, frustrated St. Paul citizens, led by journalist Howard Kahn, took the fight to local corruption. Chicago detective Jamie Wallace, hired by Kahn and Commissioner of Public Safety Henry Warren, wiretapped the St. Paul Police Department for over a year. Those wiretaps were then printed in the St. Paul Daily News, and the O'Connor Layover Agreement ended with the conviction or resignation of many of the city's police force. But in 1936, Brown was discharged for inefficiency, breach of duty, malfeasance, but due to the influence of equally mobbed up County Attorney Michael Kincaid, a Ramsey County jury declined to return an indictment against Big Tom. And the old guard was gone by the end of the 1930s. Police chiefs O'Connor and Brown both died free men in 1924 and 1959, respectively. So
Does any of this criminal history reflect on the current state of St. Paul?
that's like, there's this term, Minnesota nice.
Yeah.
And you're like looking at this and you're like, holy shit, this place was fucking nuts at a certain point.
I think we're just holding people at gunpoint being like, tell everyone we're nice.
Yeah. That's what it seemed like.
I mean, we still have tons of corruption and horrible cops and all that shit.
Oh yeah, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We were around in 2020.
Not great. Yeah. So
Yeah, because it's not a place that you think of as being just like the wild west, but
No.
this clearly was at one point. Now knowing this, I desperately want to go back to
Yes.
St. Paul and see if any of this shit is still around.
Yes.
Because this shit's rad. I feel like
so cool.
somebody should have at least a historic marker, but definitely a movie thing.
Here's a Pokestop.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Denoting.
There we go.
Ooh.